So Wayne, this has been a conversation that's been brewing for quite a while, not just between you and I and some of our chats, probably in the mind of the person that's listening to this who has a successful business. They've got a few employees, but they keep hitting hurdles in terms of really building a company culture that gives them freedom, that gives their people freedom, and ultimately creates these raving fan clients. So what I would love to do is just kind of give a little, if you can create a little bit of a snapshot of how life looks today within your company, within your culture, within your team, because some of the stuff that we're going to dive into today is almost too good to be true for people. They're like, it doesn't exist. Nobody wants to work and they're all on their phones and all this kind of stuff. But you've created truly a reality where that doesn't exist. So give us a little snapshot into, a day in the life of what you and your team are creating.
No, you're spot on, Jesse. It's funny that you say it that way because I was part of this kind of entrepreneur group recently, and hearing these people talk about the fact that no one wants to work or all these employee issues that they're having. I was standing there trying to listen to them and trying to be empathetic, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, no, but like I don't get it. My people aren't that way. Like my team is not that. So yeah, the team that we have, I mean, first and foremost, they're incredible. They are what most people would describe as the generation who doesn't want to work, the generation who bounces from job to job, the generation who, is you catch them scrolling on social media all day and is constant prodding and pushing and cajoling. That is my team. And my team, I don't have to worry about those things. My team is what I would call a self-accountable, high-performance team. And so for me, as the quote-unquote leader of this group, which is a whole interesting thing, like I view it as kind of leadership as if I were a border collie or a sheepdog. So like I'm in the back, just helping steer and guide and direct. I'm not out front, like listen to me, follow me, do what I say. And so for me, as the quote unquote leader of this group, my life is completely different than it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. I literally went from, working easily 70, 80 hours a week. I would work a typical day, 7 to 5, 5:30, go home, eat supper with the family, and then jump back into more work for another few hours. And then same thing on the weekends. I was up at the office on the weekends, breakfast with the family, up at the office, work. And what's so interesting, Jesse, is that I had this mindset that I'd adopted over this time, that I was a terrible leader and that I couldn't manage people well. And that was my reality. And looking back at where I'm at today, it's like a completely different person. And I know that's odd, I'm speaking about myself in like this third person thing, but it's just the reality today. If you told me then that this was possible, I would have told you absolutely not. Not unless maybe you had a bunch of VC money or an angel investor or something who just padded your pockets, with all this money to do all these cool things. But it's the way that we operate now.
And it sounds like because of what you've created with this culture, and we'll dive into that in a second, that you really get to see your team fulfilling their personal and professional goals on a consistent basis, because you've created this culture of, I don't know if celebration is the right word, but it seems like a very positive environment that people they want to be there and they want to do their best work. It doesn't sound like you have to, light a bunch of fires and storm around and make things happen. It sounds like more like you just kind of stay out of the way and let them be the genius that they want to be.
I couldn't have said it better. That's exactly it. Like once I got past those things, and once we put the systems and the processes, and I began leaning into some self-limiting beliefs, I guess, in myself, that is exactly it. It's like I got out of the way, I enabled them, I empowered them, I inspired them, and just allowed them to be the amazing human beings that they are, to do what they can do that I can't do. And I just got out of the way. And it's amazing what happens when you get to that point, right? It is where I believe true scale comes in. So for me, scale isn't about you know, a certain multiple of revenue or multiple of profit. Scale to me is where there has been a complete dislinking between your effort as the owner, as the entrepreneur, and the output that is produced. So to me, that is when true scale is achieved, is when you're no longer the piece that's linking these things together. You remove yourself from that equation.
Wow, you said a lot there, and that is like your business has become a freedom generator. It generates freedom for you, for your family. It generates freedom for your team. Ultimately, it generates freedom for the clients that are coming to you who are getting their problems solved. And the question popped in when you were just saying that. What if there was a percentage of, let's say, total competence with any of your given team members? How much of that did they bring to the table, and how much of that was fostered and nurtured and developed as a result of your culture?
Sure. I would say that, you know, for some people, they came in with a core set of skills, some competencies around what their job is. For others, it was more about innate leadership qualities or innate personality makeups. And what we did was we enabled them to shine in those areas. I think it was maybe Andrew Carnegie, I don't remember who it was, but he talked about how that every single person on his team was gold. They were like gold, but they had to move a lot of the dirt away to allow that gold to shine, that gold to be found. And so for my team, I believe that to be true. Some of them have come from, unfortunately, very toxic work environments where they were marginalized, their input was marginalized, they were not treated with respect. And you know, if I were to probably go interview their previous employer and ask them, you know, about this person and how they performed there, I would probably hear a lot of negative things. But these same people in this new environment, which I believe is the culture that's created, are completely different people. And yet it's the same person. It's just, I think a big part of it is what we're looking for, right? What we look for in our people and what we're willing to do the work on and in to remove the dirt to allow their brilliance to shine, their gold to shine, if you will.
That's such a great example. You know, I think about farming and gardening that, you know, you require fertile soil, you require the right seed or the right plant, and then you just got to tend it and take care of it. And nature kind of takes care of the rest. And yet we see so many employers and so many entrepreneurs who take a perfectly good seed and then throw it out on the pavement and wonder why it's not blooming, or they've got this beautifully fertile culture and soil, but maybe they don't have the right mechanism for bringing the right people in. And so it really seems like a harmony that you've kind of cracked that code. So let's go back in time. Let's go back to when you were working 70, 80 hours a week, sneaking away for meals with your family and diving right back in. What were some of the things that you perceived as obstacles to true scale, as you call it? What were the speed bumps that were getting in your way?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's kind of like looking back at an old nightmare or something when you ask that question. You know, it's like
you're in a safe place. You're in a safe place.
Like, I don't want to go there, but no, I mean, what I would say is that, you know, I started this business out of kind of this passion of mine. It was helping other people, helping them achieve things that, you know, they needed to achieve, they wanted to achieve, whatever it may be. And you know, as so many people in business do, they launch into these things, they jump into these things because it's somewhere deep inside of them. They want to help other people, you know, whatever the business may be. That's, you know, that's varies. But so for me, I was doing this thing and I realized I'd gotten to the point where I'd grown it as a quote unquote, one man show, as large as I could possibly get it. And then the question becomes, what do you do next? Well, you bring people on, you outsource, you do all these things. And in theory, that is supposed to work, right? In theory, you bring somebody on and no, it may not be, now you're able to do twice as much, but there should be a multiplier. And what I found myself in that environment in those years was that it was almost a negative consequence of that. So yeah, we could do a little bit more, but for the little bit more we could do, the layer of stress that got added amplified. You know, so for me doing it by myself, I could manage the stress. It was just me. You add a person, yeah, we can do a little bit more, but the stress level for me now is amplified. So it was just this continual cycle of bringing the person into the team, try to teach them, try to train them. And to be honest with you, as much as I don't want to admit it, my mindset was the same mindset that so many of these entrepreneurs I have conversations with today. It's people don't want to work, they're messing things up, they just don't have the skills, they don't have the abilities, they're lazy, they're all these things were running through my head. And yet these same people are just beautiful performers. They're amazing people. So much of it was this lens through which I was looking and peering into my own business.
And it sounds like it really became a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, it's like you're gonna see what you're looking for, and so you probably had some experiences that were uncomfortable and painful and frustrating because you saw the dream, you saw the vision, you knew that people were the key, but then the experience that you were having of those people was like really far from the vision. So what were some of the first things that you did? Was there like a threshold moment where you were like, shoot, I just got to try anything, and you tried something, or like, what was it?
Yeah. So in hindsight, the thick skin, thick head, like stubborn, the typical entrepreneur. Yeah. So the moment for me actually wasn't about me. It's so funny how that works in our lives. Oftentimes we can see things through a different lens, through a side lens, much more clearly than we can see it for ourselves. And so I'd always had friends who owned businesses, were in business. And, I've always been a big believer in coaching and mentorship. And so it's probably been 6 years ago, I was a part of the CEO group and we met once a month for lunch. I had a friend of mine who had a business that was successful. He was in the process of this point of considering selling the business, or he could stick with it for probably another 2 years, and it would be worth probably 10 to 15 times as much as it was if he had just continued the growth that he was on. And so I invited my friend to this luncheon thinking this is going to be great. He's going to be around all these other entrepreneurs who have, bigger businesses, successful businesses, and they're going to convince him, stick with this. Don't go to work for the man. You've got this. And so we get there, and the topic of conversation for the day was employees or team members. And so people are going around the room and you had to say your business and the number of employees that you had working on your team. And so we're going around, and it's about to be this gentleman who by far has the biggest business, by far the most successful in terms of business success. And it's his turn. So he says his name, he says the business, and he says, in terms of the number of people we have working for us, it's only about half of them. And so everyone kind of bust out laughing. And it's this whole, adage that only half the people who show up actually want to work. And so Jesse, for the next hour and a half, there was this whole circle of people sharing horror story after horror story of their team members and how, it was just a nightmare managing their teams and how they couldn't deal with it and how all this stuff. And so at the end of the meeting, I still remember my friend, we're walking out together, and I said, so what'd you think? He said, well, it made my decision very easy. I'm definitely going to be selling my business. And so this meeting, I laugh now in hindsight, but this meeting, what I intended to be a good positive thing to encourage him turned into the polar opposite. And it was in that moment, that was the pivot. That was the moment that I realized it doesn't have to be this way. Like, I was in that group. I was a part of that. That was my reality at the time. But I just knew, I knew of other businesses. I knew of other organizations where people showed up, where they loved to be there, where they, it was a lot of camaraderie, where it was, there wasn't this constant prodding and pushing and cajoling and like begging and pleading and like all these, shenanigans that go on between leaders or managers and their teams. And it was in that moment that I said, there is a better way, and I'm going to figure out how to make that happen for us. So for me, this has been now probably about a 6-year journey in this process.
And how fast did you start to see measurable different results from what you've been trying? Because obviously it sounds like you've left that experience with a totally different resolve, different level of commitment to really make this happen. So from that day until you started to feel like, wow, this is actually working, what was that period like?
Yeah, for us, there was So when I made that resolve, that commitment, the initial decision, the initial actions that I began to take actually created more problems. So I actually had a longtime employee when I began implementing some of the things that I was learning, some of the things that I was studying. A longtime employee said, if this is where we're going, this is not for me. Now, in that moment, that was terrible for me, that was terrible for the company. But in hindsight, that was probably one of the most important decisions ever, allowing that person to walk away, not begging, not pleading, not getting them to stay. Because what they were a part of, they were a part of a culture that I was no longer going to tolerate. They were part of a culture that I was no longer going to accept as our culture. And so by keeping them, they were basically saying, by letting them go, they were basically saying, I'm not willing to participate in where we're going, which is high accountability, which is polar opposite from what most people think. They think when you think of these good cultures where people have fun and they show up and they do all these things, that it's not high accountability. But what I've discovered is you can have both of those things coexisting: high accountability and meaningful work, high accountability and fun, engaging workplace as well.
But one thing that I hear in that, Wayne, is that your inner shift and that decision that you made in your heart, in your core, then was such a solid upgrade of your own standards that you were not able to tolerate anything less than that, not in a judgmental way towards anybody else, but just basically being super clear and saying, this is where we're going, and giving them the choice, yes or no, take it or leave it. If you want to be on, let's go. And if not, totally cool. There's definitely another place that would love to have you, and, Godspeed, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's it. I think a big part of it, actually, I did this, but it wasn't as intentional as it should have been, is an initial apology from the leader to the team. In other words, I'm sorry for allowing this culture to exist the way it does. I apologize for the things that we've allowed, for the things that we haven't allowed that maybe we should have allowed. It's my responsibility as the leader to ensure this soil, and when we think of culture comes from the same Latin word as cultivate. And so it literally is almost this agricultural term. And it's about breaking that soil. It's about mending the soil. It's about ensuring the right nutrients are there for the seeds that are going in the ground. And, I would just say that so often people, the language that often gets used right now is A players, like everyone wants A players.
Right.
But if you've got a B culture or a C culture, or even worse, A players may come, but they're never going to stay.
Yeah.
A players crave A cultures, right? Cultures that are fertile soil, that give them autonomy and yet hold them accountable to a higher standard, if you will.
Those two things you just said, every entrepreneur that I've worked with who has successfully scaled not just their business, but the scale of the business was the byproduct of improving the inner workings. Every single one of them, I've seen the exact same thing that you just said. There's a clear expectation. There's a clear freedom that, hey, you get to be this peak performer in this space, and we're going to give you everything you need, and we're going to stay out of your way and let you be you. And I've also seen companies that try and hold on too tight and end up creating a B or C culture, as you said. And I've seen people come in as A players and immediately drop to the level of B or C because that's just kind of what the environment dictates.
Yeah, it's so true. We always perform to the level of the environment that we're in.
Love
right.
that.
And so you take an A player and you drop them in that culture, they're going to go down to that level, or they're going to leave. Yep. One of the two. Yep. They're not going to stick around. And, for me at that point, what I had to come to terms with was that, I always thought that at some point I would get to the culture thing, right? At some point, like, we're not Silicon Valley. We don't have all this money to throw at napping pods and, fully stocked kitchens and all this stuff. Like, one day we'll deal with culture when we can. But what I've come to realize is that if you are not intentional about building a high performance culture, right? This perfect culture, then you are unintentionally building a mediocre, a poor performing culture. It requires intentional effort. This isn't something that you can just, wave the magic wand and say, we're going to go from mediocre culture to great culture. cultivate, right? It's to work, it's to tend, it's to break the soil, it's to put the nutrients and all those things. So for me, it was about this intentional shift from I have to give intention to the culture that I'm allowing, that I'm creating, that I'm tolerating here.
And within that, I imagine that there's quite a bit of patience, knowing that you're embarking on this whole new chapter, and that there's probably a level of patience that you had for the people who did choose to stay, knowing that they're making a commitment to this new thing, and that there's a lot of trust that you're asking for. And so this is probably like this real-time measuring and monitoring of the soil, but also not expecting like some, Monsanto GMO immediate Frankenstein cucumber to pop out just because you made the shift.
Spot on. I mean, that is probably, for me personally, the biggest lesson is patience. Because we are shifting an entire culture. We are we're working with people at a different level. In other words, we're going beyond just, did you check all the boxes on a checklist? I'll give you an example, Jesse, that may help people listening to understand a little bit more. Somebody emailed me just the other day, and they said, hey, I know that your team is super responsive when we email or when we call. Can you give me, how do you foster that? How do you create that? And so my response back was, there are definitely things that we could do. Like, I could install software on the computers that would track response times and score people and grade people. But I said, that would defeat the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish. You see, we are after a culture of remarkability, right? We want to do something unique, and doing something unique, something remarkable. If we begin putting all these micro systems to measure and checkpoint people, what does that communicate to my team? If I'm having to install something on your computer that tracks your response time, what does that communicate? Does that communicate that I trust you, that you're an amazing person, that you're gonna, you want to exceed expectations, you want to create a remarkable place where people are talking about us because of how responsive we are? No, it's going to do the polar opposite of that. And so I think, if we look a layer deeper, there's so much of this is about trust. So much of building this culture is about trusting your people and trusting yourself as the leader, that you can do this, that you can recreate this culture. Because for so many, at least in my conversations with entrepreneurs, so many are in this culture right now. Their business culture is so toxic, it's so negative, that they can't see any way to change this thing that they've got. And they don't trust themselves enough to believe that they have the abilities, the skills to do it, or else they would have already done it. And so it's about trust both directions.
And as the leader, you go first in that, and you front load any new change with excellent communication, backed it up with commitment, giving them lots of reasons to put their own trust in it. But then sounds like you stay out of their way and let them take off. You don't keep pushing the plant to grow. If it's the right seed in the right soil and you're getting the nutrients, you can sit back. And sounds like that's really where you're at. You're in a place right now where you have time freedom. Your business is healthy. It's thriving. You've got, if you wanted to amp up a little bit, you could probably have a waiting list out a mile long because of the solidity of this culture. And based on everything that I'm hearing you say and some other conversations we've had, that this is a learnable skill. This is not luck. This is not, the particular industry somebody happens to be in. It doesn't matter what the economy is doing. This is the sort of thing that is learnable, it's teachable, and somebody can start implementing this regardless of what their past history has been.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, I know this is very cliche, but I would say if I can do this, if I can make this pivot, this transition, then I promise you anybody else can. You see, I was carrying so much baggage around about my beliefs, about my abilities as a leader, as a manager. I was carrying all this baggage with me because I kept seeing evidence that I wasn't good at it, or that I would have to micromanage if I wanted good results. And so I say that one of the first places that we have to start, if we're going to fix the culture, is the person in the mirror, right? We have to begin there. I think it was Michael Gerber who said, that if your thinking is sloppy, your business will be sloppy. And for me, my thinking around my ability to lead, my ability to manage, even what I believed about my team members was extremely sloppy and extremely detrimental. And it's Pygmalion effect. Am I saying that one right?
Mm-hmm.
The Pygmalion. So it's the self-fulfilling prophecy where if you expect better things, I think that was the study with students where they told them that they were above average students. They told the teacher they were above average students, and the teacher believed they were above average students and taught them as if they were above average students, when in reality they were all just mediocre students, and their scores and their grades all improved drastically. And that is what most entrepreneurs are stuck with. They're on the opposite end of that. They don't have these positive expectations. Their expectations around themselves and around their team are the opposite direction. So if I constantly expect someone to screw up, I'm always going to be looking for the ways they screwed up.
Right. You know, it makes me think of a conversation I have frequently with people who are like you, like me, are operating in the wisdom economy. You're sharing knowledge and experience, and that's your business. And a question that I get a lot is, you know, how come people aren't buying my new offer? You know, when are people going to start buying the thing that I'm selling? And, you know, in the past, I used to say, well, let's get under the hood and let's look at your language and all this kind of stuff. And I had just realized people will buy what you're selling the split second you sell what they want. It's like, shouldn't be that hard, but it's so easy to get into your own expertise. And then especially, you know, an entrepreneur listening to this is listening to podcasts, and they're listening to, you know, reading a book, and they're taking a management course in communication. They're watching this interview. So they're just scrambling to get all this information. But it sounds like what you've done is actually looked at your team through almost a marketing lens, where it's like, what do they want and what do they need? And then you sort of subjugated your own ego to then give them what it is that you felt they needed. And then the results speak for themselves.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I think, you know, for most, so there is actually like this framework that I didn't know really existed. So when I said that, when I had that conversation with my friend and he said, I'm done, I'm walking away. And I had that moment of insight of like, you can have a great culture. You can not be stressed out all the time. You can have amazing people. You know, that began this whole process of learning and studying and getting my hands on everything I possibly could from the people who've actually done it. So not necessarily just from academics who've looked out, you know, from the outside in, but from people who've actually have the great companies, who have people that love showing up every day. And for us, it was a ton of trial and error. Right. So that's where the patience that we talked about earlier. So we would implement some stuff. We would watch how that did. We would make iterations. We would implement some stuff. But it really for us boils down to this, you know, these kind of 4 or 5 questions that I think they're already being answered for every organization. The question is, how clear are the answers? Because clarity is a prerequisite for growth. Right? You have to be clear. Your team has to be clear about where you're going, what you're trying to accomplish, and all these things. And what happens though is a byproduct of growth is complexity, right? So we have to have clarity to grow, but the byproduct of growth is often complexity. So we need systems for this thing to do this, and we need a process for this. And so we end up creating all this complexity when in reality, what we need is that clarity. So for us, it's been this constant evolution of making sure that we're keeping the main things, that we're being crystal clear in these 4 or 5 core areas, this kind of framework that we've developed around our culture. And, you know, when we walk through that framework, and when I explain kind of this framework and these questions to people, they all know it because they're already doing it. But the reality is they're not doing it with intention. Right? It goes back to what we talked about earlier, the difference between unintentional versus intentional. These things are happening, but we have no meaningful intention behind them. Therefore, they're not valued. Therefore, no one embraces them. Therefore, we end up with people who don't value the things we value, who don't operate the way we think they should. So again, this cycle that we as entrepreneurs, we are the beginning point of this cycle, and we're also the ending point of that cycle.
Dude, the way that you break it down so simply into this framework, and that you are putting the leader first. It really is an inside job. And now you're talking about specific practices and tools that once they've made that choice, they can take that ambition and take that intention and put it into something that gives them traction. It's anybody listening to this, it's like, why don't I have a bigger team? Oh, this is why. And it really, I think about, the hustle culture, and people just sort of accept that things have to get harder. And I agree with you about complexity, that as you grow, things do get more complex, but they don't have to stay that way. And the speed with which you can employ clarity to simplify something is the speed at which you grow.
Yeah, I agree with you. It comes down to, but here's the interesting thing about that, Jesse, is that, whenever I was initially growing, I was add a team member, outsource some stuff, hire some contractors, whatever it may be. The complexity that was created around those things was so stressful, right, that I questioned, like, do I want to even grow this thing? The complexity that's now created whenever we grow, here's the beautiful thing. That complexity is no longer my sole responsibility. Mm. The people on the team, they see the complexity for what it is. They fix the complexity. They adjust the systems that need to be adjusted. They tweak the things that need to be tweaked. And it's not me having to run in and say, oh, we should do this or we should do that. I'll give you an example. We just hired somebody, added a new team member, and the department that was going through the interviewing and the hiring process, they basically said, hey, going through this process, we noticed that there's a couple of gaps here in the way we do our interviewing and the way we do our hiring. We're going to fix those gaps. They just brought it to my attention, like, hey, I just want to let you know we're doing this thing. Like, cool, yeah, awesome, run with it. Like, they don't need me to do it. Another person, just literally on Thursday or Friday, another team member said, hey, I noticed we have like a little storage area, and it's gotten cluttered over time as people bring stuff in from various projects and put it in the storage area. And this person texted me and said, hey, just want to let you know, I measured all the shelves back there. I'm going to order some bins and I'm getting some labels, and I'm going to reorganize all that back there so that it's clean and organized. Awesome. Like, I didn't have to go tell them, hey, I didn't have to go say, hey, did anybody else notice that the back storage room's like looking kind of cluttered right now? I didn't have to say, hey, did anybody else notice the hiring process has some issues and it's kind of clunky? And that, though, like 5 or 6 years ago, that was me. Like, I was running around like, what's wrong with you people? Like, right. I was never a yeller or a screamer, but it's like, can you not see? Like, the closet's dirty. Like, we need to fix the hiring thing. No, it's the culture now is such that people are self-accountable. They are high performers, and my life is so much better because of it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like theirs is as well. And, those examples of, a mess that needs to be cleaned up or an inefficiency that can be improved, the leader will see those things, but then that creates a whole other layer of complexity. Like, how do I bring this up? Do I do the old sandwich technique? Hey, you guys are doing a great job. This needs some work. You guys are awesome. It's like, well, then next time you go to compliment them, they're like, what do you really want? It's like, it just creates all this smoke and mirrors. It's just a drag for everybody. But there's something, I forget who to credit this for or with, but your garbage is someone else's gold. I think it was Joe Polish. And, the thing that each one of us loves to do is someone else's nightmare, and vice versa. So that person who took charge and said, hey, I noticed that the storage room is getting a little bit disorganized. So I measured it. I got some bins. And what I heard in that was past tense description of what they've already done, not coming to you with another idea, because it was so much a part of their intrinsic ability and so much of what they wanted to do that it would have been harder for them to restrain themselves than to just do what felt natural and right. And man, that's the DNA of a dream team right there.
Yeah, that's it. The funny thing you brought that back up is that person was saying today how literally over the weekend they were like geeking out, looking up storage bins and the type of labels they were going to get. Right.
Right, totally.
that,
Yeah.
that's
And we each have our genius, you know. And so for you, sounds like a natural part of your genius is being able to zoom back and see what does the soil need? What is the amendment that needs to be made? You know, to really just take the farming analogy all the way, is the soil too alkaline or is it too acidic? Is there too much clay? And what do we need to do to make this soil better? And you just know at this stage, having done it for so long and helped other people do it, that you can just come in and go this, that, the other thing. And that is part of your genius and part of your skill. And for somebody else who truly wants to lead in this way, once they have the framework and they know the questions to ask and they're coming from that place of true commitment and intention, it sounds like there's nothing left to do but succeed.
Yeah, what I would say is that either way, you're going to be doing the work. So in other words, like if you're in a culture right now that's a negative culture where you, as even the leader, dread going to work because you don't want to have to quote unquote deal with your team, deal with the drama, deal with the whatever, you're having to do the work. You're having to, in your case, probably micromanage the people, or at least you'd feel that way. And so I would say, if you're going to be doing the work, do the work that is going to be lasting. Do the work that is going to produce and create this soil where it doesn't matter if you have one seed planted or if you have 10 seeds planted, the soil is going to produce amazing fruit, vegetables, if you will, using the farming analogy. Instead of, the other analogy is you've planted in this soil that's not very fertile. And so you've got these people there and you're constantly having to run around and say, okay, do you need water today? Do you need fertilizer? Do you need weeds pulled from around you? Like, what's the issue today? Whereas when you take the time to get the soil right initially, right, and you invest your time and energy and effort there, the dividends that come from that are so much greater, not only in terms of legitimate ROI, right? More productivity from your team members, better revenue, better profits, better client relations, all those things, but internally, right? So it's like, I kind of said this at the very beginning, but when I was in that group just a few weeks ago, hearing these entrepreneurs come to me and talk about all their employee issues and challenges, it's like, I don't even relate to that. Like, I just don't, like, why? Why are you doing this to yourself?
Right. Why are you doing this to your people? And why are you doing this to your family? And why are you doing this to your customers and your clients? Wow. What I love about this whole dialogue is that the way that you explain it is so self-evident, and that anybody listening to this can, if they're in a place where they genuinely want to grow, can take away so many nuggets from this conversation. And I know there's going to be some people listening to this that are going to want to, kind of get a time machine and say, well, I don't want to figure out the questions. I want Wayne to tell me the questions. So what would be a next step if somebody wanted to get more of this information?
Yeah, just you can message me, you can email us, and we can set up a time to chat more about it.
Cool. I have a feeling you're going to be getting a lot of very interested people who are ready to get off the hamster wheel, ready to stop being a firefighter, but more importantly, ready to stop being an arsonist.
Yeah. I love it. That's the old seagull management approach. Yeah.
Right. Totally. And I guess just the only other thing that brings up for me is I'm just imagining people going through your process, availing themselves of this incredible human technology, and then being confronted with the levels of freedom that they have. They're like, wow, what do I do with all my time? But that's a beautiful problem to have.
Yeah, it's time for sure. It's, so much more though about, for me, it was about the peace, peace and the lack of stress. And there's something extremely rewarding when you're able to shift from this mindset of having to quote unquote manage people or having to quote unquote lead people to, you get to invest in your people. You get to help remove away some of the dirt. You get to help them see things in themselves that they would not have otherwise seen. My goal for every person that's a part of our team is this, that when they leave our team, that they will be a better human being as a result of having been on our team. So not just work related, but better holistically as a human. And for me, that shift from having to deal with the issues, having to deal with the people problems to I get to help them discover who they are. I get to help them live in Dan Sullivan's term, their unique abilities.
Mhm.
It's such a joy. And I said I carried that mindset around for so long that I couldn't manage and I couldn't lead, to where now I actually, as much as an introvert as I am, I look forward to our team meetings. I look forward to my one-on-ones with my team, because for me, there's such joy in watching them discover, in watching them live into who they're capable of being.
I don't think we could end on a higher note, man. So good. And yeah, anybody who is listening to this and watching, you have employees or you are, planning to grow. I think what Wayne just laid out is a beautiful framework that is completely natural. It's very simple. And it sounds like everybody that is a part of this, including the family members of these teams, and just such a powerful ripple effect. And I think I think you're going to be affecting a lot more than just the entrepreneurs that take advantage of this.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you so much for your time, Jesse.
My pleasure, man. Always good to chat with you. And for those of you that listen to this, hopefully you got some value out of it. Reach out to Wayne and change your life.
Thanks so much.